Yeah, I'm not a veteran. I'm a civilian, obviously, but I just have felt so heartbroken about the suffering that a good number of veterans have when they get out. And so I was running the National Association of Drug Court Professionals as a CEO, during the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict.
Right.
The war on terror. And our combat veterans were coming home after multiple tours, and they were in, some of them, a good number of them were in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ocean Rock Podcast. Today, we have a very special show in conjunction with South Coast Chronicles. I have here Camille Cox. Hi, Camille.
Hi.
Our special guest for today is Wes Huddleston. Wes has been advocating for and helping veterans who have substance misuse and or behavioral health treatment needs for decades, as he's the former CEO of the Washington, D.C. based National Association of Drug Court Professionals, also known as NADCP, and he's also the founder and executive director of Justice for Vets. Through these organizations, he's led the only national organizations dedicated to transforming the way the justice system identifies, assesses, and treats justice-involved veterans. During his 18 years of service and executive management at the NADCP, Mr. Huddleston authored 22 publications, testified numerous times before U.S. Congress, state legislatures, and international parliaments, and was interviewed repeatedly by radio, television, and print media, appearing on NPR, CNN, C-SPAN, and in the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today, just to name a few. Due in big part to his leadership, between 1997 and 2015, there are over 4,000 treatment courts worldwide, nearly 800 of which are veteran treatment courts. West is on the advisory boards of the Harvard Medical School CHA Division of on Addiction, and also All Points North. He is newly elected chairman of the board of Warrior Now, a veteran services organization in Colorado, and is the former vice chairman of the board of the Independence Fund, which was a national philanthropic foundation granting mobility technology and improved care to our nation's catastrophically wounded combat veterans. He has received numerous national honors through his career, including the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy Directors Award, the United States Congressional Horizon Award, as well as awards from the American Association for the Treatment of Opioid Dependence and the Johnson Institute, just to name a few. We are honored to announce that West has joined forces with South Coast Counseling and Ocean Rock as an advisor to our treatment services for veterans. I have no doubt that we can have a significantly solid program to help veterans in Orange County who are struggling with substance use and mental health disorders. Without any further ado, West, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here. Camille, good to see you.
Good to see
I'm excited.
you. Yeah.
Now, we've got a series of questions we wanted to go into to really get more education, both for us and for our viewers, about veterans and how we can help veterans. But before we go into that, I just wanted to hear a little bit from you about your background and how you got into this field.
Well, generally, I got into this field because 36 years ago I got clean and sober.
There you go.
And I didn't think I was going to make it as a banker, so I kind of felt like I could help people get the freedom that I was so freely given all these years ago, and I just really had a heart for that. So I ended up kind of going down the route of becoming a counselor and kind of working my way up, and I've really fell in love with working with people that were justice involved. Mm-hmm. So I worked behind the bars in prison as a therapist. I worked as a probation officer. Ended up starting the first drug court in the early 90s in Oklahoma, and that's kind of how I got involved in the whole treatment court world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've had a long history of helping people and figured out how to really get into the veteran space and justice system to help those in need.
Yeah, yeah. I am not a veteran. I'm a civilian, obviously, but I just have felt so heartbroken about the suffering that a good number of veterans have when they get out. And so I was running the National Association of Drug Court Professionals as a CEO, during the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict,
Right.
The war on terror. And our combat veterans were coming home after multiple tours, and they were some of them, a good number of them were ending up in handcuffs. And instead of prison, kind of the only thing that a community would know to do is to put them in a drug court or put them in a mental health court. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I became aware of, wow, we're seeing veterans who've never been arrested before, never been in trouble, but they're very disordered in these particular cases. And they were ending up in drug courts and veterans in mental health courts, and they weren't doing very well.
Right.
And so luckily, one of our board members, a guy named Judge Robert Russell in Buffalo, New York, was presiding over one of these courts and had a veteran standing in front of him. He was about to kick him out of the program for non-compliance. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there was a Vietnam veteran there who's the court coordinator, a guy named Hank Porowski. And Hank said, "Your Honor, could I just take this guy out in the hall and talk to him, veteran to veteran?" And that was literally the moment where everyone kind of realized, boy, we actually need a separate track of this drug court model or the mental health court model, but for veterans.
Right.
And it all really started there in Buffalo, New York in 2008.
Wow.
And just to continue this story, there was a news article about this first veterans court in Buffalo, New York. And the next day, a bunch of veterans from the community showed up and said, "We want to help. We want to volunteer. We want to be mentors." And, courtrooms don't know what to do with volunteers generally. Mm-hmm. But in this case, it filled that beautiful gap of camaraderie that a lot of the veterans that were in this new veterans treatment court needed. They needed each other, but they also needed really well-functioning and successful veterans to come alongside them,
right,
and mentor them and help them. And so, as you mentioned in my bio, today there's close to 800 of these veterans treatment courts around the country, and they're dealing with mostly combat veterans who have severe post-traumatic stress disorder, moral injuries, and substance use disorders, and they're making a huge difference. And in every one of these courts, there's one right here. One of my favorite ones is right here in Orange County, not too far from here. And mentors from the community show up every day and help these veterans get the services that they need and get the help that they need.
Wow. Well, that's so fascinating that you were able to start that and grow that over those number of years and provide something that was missing, a missing link. As you know, Southwest Counseling has been around since 1968, one of the oldest treatment programs in Orange County, California. And, with prior leadership has included veterans, and there's been a lot of focus on the justice system, veterans, and also probation approved and different individuals. When we took over, we also increased the access to care and the quality of the care as far as 24/7 treatment. We have nursing, we have medical director, psychiatrist, therapist, and the whole kind of 9 yards, 24/7. We're located in Costa Mesa, California. And then we have an outpatient program, Ocean Rock, and Ocean Rock has been around for a few years now. Ocean Rock provides both in-person and virtual treatment program, but more of the outpatient setting. So between Ocean Rock and South Coast, we are able to provide a full continuum of care for those who choose to do both. And for those who are looking for either inpatient or outpatient, we have those options. But what we wanted to announce is we're really looking forward to working with UWest on increasing the access to care and kind of breaking down the barriers of care for veterans. And we've been able to get contracts for both of these companies where we're able to work with veterans and work with their families, and we're looking forward to working with you in order to be able to provide them with high quality care. So without any further ado, I'd really wanted to go over some of these questions that we've kind of put together so we can provide the information to those watching. Question number one. West, while you were CEO of the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, what led you to focus on veterans and stand up Justice for Vets?
So Justice for Vets was and is to this day a branch of the National Association of Drug Court Professionals dedicated to veterans treatment courts. And so what happened was that first veterans treatment court in Buffalo started organically. Judge Russell was on our board of directors, and he and another judge from Rochester, Judge John Schwartz, began to talk to me about how do we expand this model of veterans treatment courts to every community across the country. There are veterans that are in jail and they have no option. And a felony is going to ruin their life. It's going to ruin their trajectory. More importantly, they're at high risk of suicide, and they really need the intervention that these courts provide. The VA needs to get involved, and we need to really bring to bear everything we can in these courtrooms. And so it was through a discussion with those two founder judges of this model where we started this organization called Justice for Vets. And the idea behind Justice for Vets was, number one, to expand the good news, kind of evangelize to thousands of drug court professionals and mental health court professionals across the country, like, hey, you need one of these. And then the other really charge of Justice for Vets was to get on Capitol Hill and really fight for funding for them, and to get the VA engaged. And those things happen very fast and very easily. Such a compelling story. And we don't want to see our veterans in jail. We don't want to see men and women who have literally laid down their life or put themselves in harm's way for our freedom to not have freedom themselves when they get home. And so that was really why we stood up Justice for Vets. Okay. And we ended up doing, a whole series of training and technical assistance and evangelism and research and doing all the things we do, as a trade association to see these treatment courts for veterans expanded across the country. I was in the right place at the right time. That's kind of the blessing of it.
Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Wes, so for the listeners that don't know what a veterans treatment court is, how do they work? What goes into that?
Yeah, it's so to get into the details a little bit, an individual who's a veteran is identified upon arrest. So it really starts at arrest. We've trained jailers to ask the question, have you ever worn a uniform? And it's yes or no. Not are you a veteran? We've learned that question doesn't work sometimes because they don't want to dishonor their uniform. They don't want to admit that they were a veteran and that they're opioid dependent, or they've just been arrested for felony family assault, right, because of their trauma. So we've trained jailers to ask the question, have you ever worn the uniform? Yeah, I have. Really, tell me about that. What branch? How are you discharged, honorably, dishonorably, otherwise? What years? Are you plugged into the VA? Do you understand your benefits? Do you understand what treatment is available to you and what services you're entitled to? So some of those early questions. And then from there, it's typically a plea agreement between the prosecutor, who typically is the gatekeeper for alternatives to incarceration for individuals, and their defense attorney. And most of the time, it's public defender. So the public defender is very well educated about the Veterans Treatment Court. There's a prosecutor typically kind of dedicated to these cases, and so they rapidly get that individual kind of through a plea agreement into the court. And they appear in the court, and they walk into this courtroom, and it's a courtroom like you've never seen. There's every branch of our United States military flag behind the judge. There's a trauma dog on the front row. I get emotional.
Yeah.
They're courtrooms of healing. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is courtrooms are not places of healing. And this veteran, sees their brothers and their sisters sitting in the courtroom, and there's military language, and it feels like they've come home in a lot of ways, in the most unexpected place. And the veteran mentors that I described earlier, there'll be a mentor right there. Typically, they're kind of matched by branch. So Marine to Marine, Navy to Navy, Army to Army, infantry, whatever, combat, sometimes combat specific. Maybe it's a veteran mentor, again, a volunteer who Iraq and Afghanistan, U.S. Army infantry, and they put their hand out and say, welcome home. We're here to help you.
Yeah.
And so part of it is just getting that veteran to agree. And that oftentimes happens in that first hearing. And then they go through some legalese and they enter the program. And then let me just describe for you really quickly what a Veterans Treatment Court is. It's usually about a year long, could be longer. They're oftentimes on probation. And what's beautiful about this courtroom is the VA, there's a VA representative in the courtroom called a justice outreach worker, and their job is to basically help that veteran access every benefit and every service that they're entitled to within the federal government. And a lot of the veterans that might be listening right now, or family members of veterans, know how difficult that system is to navigate and to truly understand. Well, they have an advocate right there in the courtroom for them. And so oftentimes veterans get into services or have benefits that they're unaware of. Then you have community care providers like you,
Right.
that are there, are ready to serve and ready to provide world-class services, whether it be for behavioral health or substance use disorder needs. And you have case managers, probation officer who's more than likely a veteran. The judge is more than likely a veteran. So this veteran automatically and quickly gets their unit back among the staff and among the other participants. And so, one of the things that we know creates such difficulty in transitioning from military to civilian life is they lose their camaraderie, they lose their purpose,
Right.
they lose their connection. And in a lot of ways, this court becomes that for them again. Typically 5 phases of a Veterans Treatment Court. First phase is the most intensive, just very similar to treatment, right? There's a stabilization phase that might be 90 days. There's, and then kind of less is required of the veteran as they progress through the 5 phases over the year. But it involves, residential treatment if they need it, trauma treatment if they need it, medications, and then, intensive outpatient for a period of time, and then just regular outpatient. But they're in treatment the whole time.
Right.
And then what's different is they come to the court every week as a unit. And the prosecutor sits down and the defense attorney sits down, and it's this beautiful colloquy between the judge and the client. And you're a lawyer. You're not trained to ask open-ended questions in a court of law, right? That's like law 101, right? Don't ask open-ended questions. In a treatment court, judges are trained in how to ask those open-ended questions.
Right.
Tell me how you doing this week.
So there's actual dialogue.
There's dialogue.
Yeah.
And hey, I care about you, and I want to see you succeed. And tell me about that drug test that was somewhat in question this week, and what are we going to do about that?
Right.
And tell me about that relapse. And so I've seen miracles happen in these courts because the judges are trained clinically, and they're trained. Look, I'll cut to the mustard. It's love. They bring love into this really cold room of a court,
Right.
And it's healing. It's healing. So I mentioned Trauma Dog. I was in this particular veterans treatment court in Colorado Springs is called a trauma court, veterans trauma court, and they specialize in treating combat veterans from Fort Campbell who are home and are in legal trouble. And saw a veteran this was 3 months ago, I saw a veteran go up in front of the judge, began to talk to the judge, and he started shaking. And he was triggered by something that had just occurred in the courtroom, and he had a full-blown PTSD trigger, and he was overwhelmed with fear, and the judge stopped the court. Trauma Dog came up to him. Trauma therapist was right there, and they saved the guy's life.
Wow.
They were able to get his central nervous system calmed down, and really able to identify that he had been triggered for quite a while. He was a victim of a armed robbery he had not told anybody about, and having a gun stuck in him obviously was incredibly triggering. He'd been suffering in silence, and it kind of all came out in that courtroom. And the beautiful thing is, this is just one of thousands of stories.
Right.
What he needed was right there. So that's a long answer to your question, but there's so much beauty and love and healing that goes in these courtrooms around the structure of these 5 phases over a year of treatment.
We're so happy to know that these specialized court dockets exist in so many communities throughout the nation. We just want to thank you for dedicating yourself to this. It's really, really beautiful.
Well, thank you. My son, I was just with yesterday, is a veteran, and part of what he did in the military was he was honor guard, and so he would call me crying. I did my 3rd funeral this weekend, 3 suicides.
Wow.
Young kids, Dad. Young kids. I'm so sick of it.
Yeah.
So it means a lot to me, and there's all of us that are dedicated to helping our veterans, and we don't have to be veterans to do that, right?
Right.
So I'm honored to be working alongside the both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's amazing.
Just to hear that. And for me, the big kind of takeaway from that was, this veteran's coming into this court, which the assumption is it's going to be this cold place and this place that is there to judge him and be punitive, right? Punish him. But to have that environment where they actually do care and they listen and have these support systems is such a stark contrast from the normal court setting. So to be able to have created that and be part of that, that's just fascinating. And Wanted to thank you again for that. I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the broader veteran population. I think based on our research, the numbers kind of that there's a range, but approximately 18 million veterans in the United States today. Most of the civilians have regularly seen shocking statistics that approximately 22 veterans a day lose their life to suicide, which is more than the general population. I think almost double the general population. Can you really shed some light into what's going on here when we're talking about veteran suicide?
Yeah. I took this issue on about a year and a half ago, wrote an extensive white paper on it, and it is a minimum of 22 a day. It dropped to 17 a day, but there's other statistics that show if you include single car crashes, overdoses, without a suicide note, it's as much as 44 a day.
Wow. So
it's a shocking number. It far exceeds any other population. We're in our 20th consecutive year of losing over 6,000 veterans to suicide a year.
Wow.
20th, 2 decades. And I know of every veteran organization in this country, whether local or national, and the Veteran Services Administration or the VA, everyone's doing what they can to reduce veteran suicide. But it is epidemic. When we look at the drivers, well, first of all, 40% of veterans struggle with that transition for the same reasons I said earlier. Just they lack purpose, they lack mission, and they lack camaraderie. They lose that. Look, I think serving in the military is a strengthening experience for the vast majority of men and women that are brave enough to put on the uniform. Only 1%.
Wow.
Are willing to put on the uniform. 1% of our population. But they struggle coming out into civilian life. And, it doesn't surprise anyone, 45% of combat veterans suffer. And the drivers of that, we look at the research, the drivers of that are mental health disorders, or mental health conditions like post-traumatic stress or anxiety disorder or manic depressive disorder, certainly depression. We also see drivers such as traumatic brain injury. TBI is a major factor in suicidal risk. Substance use disorders, and then just the social determinants of health, the instability of housing, lack of employment. Inability to kind of translate my job in the military to, working out here. And and you have a combination of some of those things, plus you've really lost your purpose in life. We think that those are the primary drivers. I would put, in that order, mental health or behavioral health disorders, substance use disorders, traumatic brain injury, and being alone. So, if I could shed light on it, it's epidemic, but it's treatable. And, veterans are trained, literally trained to not ask for help.
Right.
They are trained to literally, this is where the saying, just pull up your boots and tighten your bootstrings. And you're right. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And they believe it. And they suffer alone. So I think part of the struggle is to reach veterans with the news that you're not alone, and that if you ask for help, you're going to get really good help, and that help is going to make a huge difference in your life. And I know that that's, what we're beginning to do at South Coast, and at Ocean Rock is tell that story. Like, if you come to us and you ask for help, you're going to get amazing help, and you're
Right.
going to feel better quick.
Right.
So, hopefully this podcast and whatever else we do to get the word out, you don't have to suffer alone. There is help, and help works. Treatment works. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, both of our programs are so intimate. We go to the facilities, clinical director, program director, Camille, myself, Joe Milligan, and all of us, Jeff, Christina, Katie. I mean, I could just, and Taryn. I mean, I could just keep going. There's the staff, and the staff are just all doing it because they care, because they want to be doing it. They don't have to. They can go do anything else. We're in Orange County, California. They've raised the minimum wage to astronomical numbers. So you can go work anywhere you want and make but just you don't have to work in treatment. So people who decide to work in treatment, they're doing it not just because they want to get a paycheck, but it's because that they're passionate about it. And it's the reward and the feeling of helping somebody that that's how we hire. That's kind of how we keep people and retain people. It's if you have that ingredient of wanting to help people and really doing this for the right reason, we want to create that family environment for the client who's coming in, because a lot of clients coming in, they're jaded and they feel that for whatever reason no one's there to help them, and part of what you said was they're even afraid to ask for help. That applies both to veterans and civilians alike.
Sure.
There's a lot of barriers to access to care, and there's a lot of lack of information. And so one of the reasons we have these podcasts is to raise awareness and provide you education and say, hey, look, there are programs out there that have kind of gone out of their way to get these contracts and create the infrastructure that we can help you. But obviously, you have to learn how to navigate the channels to get that help. And I think by having you on the show and continuing to push dialogue out there, we're able to do that.
Thanks.
Wes, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what did the scientific literature, what does it say are the top drivers for veteran suicide?
Yeah, again, it's, I'd say specifically post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder, depressive disorders, manic depressive disorder. So I would say those are the primary disorders relative to mental health realm. Substance use disorders. We know in all populations that those coincide oftentimes. Substance use, oftentimes is just a part of the solution of a mental health disorder, right? We self-medicate.
Right.
And so we see, people with dual diagnosis, traumatic brain injury, from multiple concussions, explosions, right? And again, the social determinants of health, just the inability to get stable housing, financial and employment problems, legal problems, post-traumatic stress and depression and anxiety have major impacts on, the family and relationships. And so kind of all that working against one another or with one another, I think is what the scientific literature would say are the major drivers.
Got it. Okay.
Interestingly, since veteran care is the responsibility of the federal government, what is Congress doing to treat veterans with these conditions and really turn the tide of this epidemic of veteran suicide?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, and I think for the listener and the viewer, it's important to know there are really two pieces of federal legislation that have been passed that are in place today, where a veteran can get help for these drivers of suicide that we just talked about. Number one it's called the Mission Act of 2018. Mission is a acronym for Maintaining Systems and Strengthening Integrated Outside Networks Act. It is basically, it says that a veteran needs to go to the VA first, see their primary care physician, kind of the gatekeeper of services, and obviously identify what the issues are and see if the VA in your catchment area, meaning where you live, provides the services that you need. So you need residential treatment for a substance use disorder. Does the local veteran hospital provide that residential care? And if not, then they can engage, or they can be referred, or they can choose to go to what's called a community care provider. And in the West, it's Tri-West is the insurance that a veteran would have, and there are approved providers under Tri-West, like your facilities, that are under contract to the VA to provide what's called community care. And community care can be triggered, number one, if the VA doesn't provide that service in particular. Number two, if I am on a long waiting list to get VA services. For example, the Mission Act says if I have to wait more than 20 days for the care that I need, whether it's substance use disorder, or it's an eye surgery, or it's treatment for post-traumatic stress, then I'm eligible for community care. Number three is if I have more than a 30-minute drive, which is not hard in Orange County to achieve. So those, and there's other eligibility, but I would think those are the top three.
Got it.
20-day wait or longer, 30-minute drive or longer, and or the VA doesn't provide the services that I need. Then I can be eligible for community care. And it's really important that the veteran and their family understand their right under the Mission Act to really advocate to go to a community care provider, and really to advocate to their primary care physician, to their psychiatrist, to the case managers at the VA, to say, I really want to go to South Coast. I've been over there, I've seen it. They have a program that I think is really going to help me. I've heard other veterans on the street, it saved their life, and I really want to go there. And I'm eligible for these reasons. Right. I've got an hour drive to the residential facility at the VA, or you're full.
Right.
And so then it's really up to us to help convince the VA that client should be authorized to come get our services. The other act was passed by Congress in 2020, and it was actually signed into law January of 2023, and it's called the Compact Act, and it is specifically to address veteran suicide. And it's straightforward and way less red tape than the Mission Act. It says, if I'm a veteran, no matter my discharge and status, and I am in a suicidal crisis, I can walk into any emergency room in America and I can ask for help right now, today, and I'm going to get that help, and the hospital's going to be paid. Number two is beyond that initial stabilization, typically 72 hours, right? It's psychiatric stabilization. I am then eligible for 30 days, sometimes up to 45 days of residential care at a facility like South Coast.
Right.
And then beyond that 30, 45 days of residential care, then I'm eligible for another 90 days of outpatient at a place called Ocean Rock.
Right.
So, veterans should know across this country that as of January 2023, they can walk into any facility that provides mental health, particularly suicide intervention, and they can get help for their suicidal ideation. They do not have to die by suicide. They can get help. They can get help today, and they can get amazing help today, and it's paid for.
That's amazing to hear. Just for them to have passed that act, the Compact Act, to cut through all that red tape, and for somebody dealing with that level of crisis, suicidal crisis, and for them to be able to do that. I mean, I'm so relieved to know that Congress and the VA now permit any veteran who's in an acute suicidal crisis to walk into the ER or the community psychiatric hospital and get that immediate help. It's also important to stress to our listeners that the same veterans are eligible for 30 to 45 days, as you mentioned, just to reiterate, of residential treatment and 90 days of outpatient treatment once released from those emergency stabilizations. We're happy to be able to have these contracts, and both through South Coast for the residential care and through Ocean Rock for the outpatient care to provide world-class mental health and substance use treatment for the veterans. And frankly, I think the most exciting part of all this for us is that we feel like there's so much lack of information out there that we really want to go out there and spread the news and spread the word, both through this channel and any other channel, so people out there, the veterans and their families, know that these both the Mission Act and more specifically this Compact Act exist, and they don't have to die, and they don't have to watch their kids die, and really there's hope out there.
Yeah, well said.
West, other than the Compact Act, are there any other mechanisms in place that would permit a veteran to access treatment for substance abuse or mental health use beyond the VA?
Just the mission and the Compact Act. And look, the VA provides outstanding services. You're right. So, we see ourselves as a partner and an extension of the VA, of services for veterans. So, the veteran is going to, a veteran is going to and needs to go to the VA first, and be assessed and as a federal agency, and they do have primary care of our veterans, and as they should. What I love about community care, which is the agencies like yours, private, treatment providers that are doing really good work, is that we fill a gap, and we fill a gap that is close to home, and we fill a gap of quality services for veterans that, for whatever reason, can't access VA services. So there's always new bills being introduced on Capitol Hill to tweak or to improve community care. I was just made aware of a bill by Senator Elizabeth Dole that seeks to expand community care for veterans, and I applaud any effort that seeks to help our veterans. So it almost depends on the year to ask me that question, but right now we have the Mission Act and the Compact Act.
Right.
Yeah.
Camille, did you have any other questions for today?
I think that's it.
That's all. Well, West, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I think the information that you shared, there's not a lot of people who know all this information. I think that you are such a unique individual in terms of, the past couple of decades working with the veterans and working with the system. And for you to bring your knowledge and expertise and help us over at South Coast and be part of what we're trying to do at South Coast and Ocean Rock, we're going to work together and really improve not only the program, the quality of the program, have such a specific track for veterans, and to be able to go and work with the VA and work with a lot of the clinics and for everyone to get to know our program. So, the veterans can feel comfortable. We've had a lot of people in military, either families and, prior to Tri-West, we've had another contract called Tri-Care West. So we are familiar with dealing with families and people in military. Tri-West and Tri-Care West are different. And so there's different kind of channels that you have to navigate. But, really trauma is such a specific component of it. And we have a really good clinical director who does EMDR and is really well versed in trauma. So we're excited. Camille's excited. I'm excited. Both of our programs are excited both to work with you and to work with the veterans out there to get the help that they need. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.